Why do we keep repeating the same patterns? We end up in the same kind of relationships. We have the same kind of reactions, even though sometimes we can actually see it coming in advance. Well, the answer will surprise you because it's not in our brain, it's in our body. What we went through early in life, often before we even had words for it, it gets stored physically as unconscious memories in our body. Our body remembers. And this informs how we hold ourselves, how we breathe, if we can reach out in relationship or if we want to pull back. In somatic therapy, body-centered work like core energetics is a way of accessing this unconscious material in a way that's hard to do by just talking about it. This is a way that we can work through this material and change how we show up in the world. So today we're going to start by talking about where this work comes from and why it's such a powerful tool for change. Then we're going to sort of step into shadow work, the unconscious self. So those of you who are interested in deep personal self-awareness and creating real change, this is a foundation really for something truly transformational. So welcome to The Crack Between the Worlds. I'm Mark Wald. And my partner in time today is Ken Goldberg, MD. Ken is a preventive medicine specialist, a teacher, a therapist, and the director of the Northwest Core Energetics Training Program. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to thank your listeners and your viewers. If they're giving us their attention, that's one of the most precious things they have.
It is. Exactly.
Yep.
So let's give them something to think about. We're going to start off, we're going to have a longer conversation about somatic work, body-centered psychotherapy, and in particular, a model called core energetics, one that both you and I studied and now you teach. I actually assisted in one of your trainings, which was really fun. And but today, I think in this moment, we're just going to talk about what is somatic therapy and where did it come from?
The history of somatic therapy, psychosomatic medicine in the West starts about, 100 and a few years ago with Freud, and remember Freud and Breuer, his mentor, and the other doctors around them were neurologists. They were all regular medical doctors. There was no such thing as psychiatry. So they would have patients who came in with symptoms, a catatonic woman or somebody who's blind, but they couldn't find anything physical, simple to diagnose and treat, and they began to understand, this had to do with their psychological state, their emotional state, and they began to understand the connection between the mind and body was way more complicated. And this is, of course, the Western understanding. In the East, things have been understood in various ways for centuries, but from a Western medical model, this was really the beginning of it. And then it evolved, Freud's main two disciples, Jung and then Reich. Jung went in the direction of transpersonal psychology, the collective unconscious, and the shadow and archetypal psychology. And Reich went in the area of character analysis and how people hold their history, physical as well as emotional and mental, and how those are all connected. He began to describe in his book Character Analysis and another work how our physical body develops along with our mind and emotions. And so that's really the history of somatic psychotherapy is, these are all connected, and how do we begin to work with that when somebody comes in with physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, mental aberrations, and so on.
And how they're all in some way connected. It's so interesting that you're right that in the East, they already had some of this stuff figured out from a non-scientific perspective. It was really...
And from less a personality perspective, they had a very energetic and holistic perspective, but it didn't so much involve people's individual thoughts and feelings and their personalities. That was less a feature because their societies don't focus on that so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So then you brought up Reich. And I would love to maybe finish that little bit of history into core.
So Reich had a number of students. two of whom, Al Lowen and John Parakis, developed bioenergetics, which was kind of the next step in taking this energetic model of character development into the 50s and 60s. And my teacher, our teacher, John Parakis, realized in bioenergetics that there was something missing. They were working with people physically, emotionally, psychologically, but the spiritual component was missing for him. So he went and sought out spiritual teachings that fit with his understanding of human energetics and the development of the personality, met and married Eva Parakis, who became Eva Parakis, and incorporated the pathwork teachings into what became core energetics.
Which were the other side of the spectrum. I mean, she was a channel, and she was a spiritual teacher through channeling,
Right.
which is, you go from the legacy of Freud
Western
to
science, Freud
this,
was a
and then the
complete
two
skeptic.
marry.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing what happened when that happened. I'm trying to remember, Reich, was he really getting involved in psychosomatic, in somatic work?
Yeah, Reich in general would immediately have his patients come in, often disrobe, wear just their underwear, lay down on the couch and breathe or kick or do physical exercises to see what was happening in their body. Are they breathing? How's their energy moving? How does that relate to their personality issues and so on?
So then he knew the connection between somehow what happens to us, perhaps mostly in childhood, but not necessarily, has an impact because we're not always able to conceptualize what's happening in our mind. So then we have a way of holding the experience, the memory in our body.
That's right.
And then that causes our body to have ways of
Exactly.
managing that.
This premise that we have an unconscious that Freud, quote, discovered, of course, that's really silly, but, described it in Western scientific terms, that notion of an unconscious includes so much about how we carry our physical posture, muscle tension, patterns of, how our physiology works, how our digestion works, how our breathing works, and so on, which are all affected by this development, mostly in childhood, right? So much, by the time you're 7, your brain is almost adult weight and development. So much of what is happening that's laid down in those early years influences how we're going to perceive the world, how we're going to interact with the world, what our patterns and habits are, and most of it's unconscious. We can't hardly remember what happened to us before that age, much less determine, oh yeah, because these events happen now, this is how I hold my body, and this is why I have the problems I have.
And the other side of that coin is when you really learn to understand this as a practitioner, you can look at somebody's body and you can tell what they went through in a very general, sometimes very specific
Sometimes
way.
very specific. There are
in their childhood. You can see it in how their body has taken shape.
That's right. You have that great example of the story of somebody who learns that it's not okay or safe to reach out for what they want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We'll do a thought experiment. I want everybody who's listening to this to sort of step into this. Imagine that you're 2.5 years old. You can kind of walk now, and you're moving around, and you have some independence, and you're walking, and there's mom, and she's happy, and it's warm, and it's a lot going on, and she's smiling at you, and you kind of waddle up to her, and you reach up, and she says no, and she slaps your hand. No, that's a stove. It's hot. So in that moment, what does a 2.5-year-old learn? What is the experience for that 2.5-year-old? They don't know what stove and hot is yet. They probably haven't burned their hands yet. They probably don't know what's happening. But what they do learn is, I'm reaching out for something that's really exciting and interesting, and everybody's happy, and all of a sudden, it's not okay. And it's a very physical experience. Their whole body tightens up. They pull back, they pull in, and they stop.
Right.
And they learn something in that moment, but it's not conceptual. They don't know why.
No.
They don't have an idea. So it's a memory they hold in their body.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So then let's say the next day they're, and I'm going to oversimplify this, but the next day they're visiting a friend's house and there happens to be a knife out on the table, and you walk over the 2.5-year-old to reach for the knife because it looks interesting, and mom slaps your hand and says, no, it's a knife, it's sharp. What do you learn? Oh, it's just not okay. I can't reach out like that. Then you go to the grocery store and all the goodies are on the lower shelves for the kids, right? And when you're in the checkout counter and you're looking at the goodies and you're like, oh, I want that. And mom says, no, you can't have that. And if this happens enough, 30 years later, that person is going to walk into our office and say, I don't know why, but I can't reach out for what I want in life.
Yep. Right.
And it's literally like a spell that's been cast on their body.
Yep.
They don't understand it.
And some of those postural things you were doing, it might appear as, fists that are in a fight against that blow that's coming that will tell them no, or it might be a collapse
A giving up.
A giving up. Oh, I can't reach for what I want. And we can see those patterns in people's posture and the way they hold their body, because they tend to be fairly noticeable once you learn to look for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They might even be sitting on their hands. It's like
hands, right.
all these ways that you unconsciously show,
I'm not going to reach out for things.
Yes.
I'm going to maybe hope to try to get you to give me the thing without me having to reach out, or various other strategies, but it's usually unconscious. So we can help people not just with the idea, the concept, it's fine to reach out, but the practice of it, learning to reuse those actual muscles and change those patterns from holding back or collapsing becomes very useful. It's like learning anything. If you just talk about it, it only goes so far.
Right.
But if you start to practice the movements of it, you start to feel it and integrate it in a way that goes much deeper into your whole sense of self, in fact, because our sense of self is very much about how do we feel in our bodies, how connected are we to our bodies, how aware are we of the sensations, feelings, body position, and so on.
And just to kind of add a little bit of spice to that, these things start off before we're even born sometimes, right? If I'm in the womb and mom and dad are fighting all the time, and maybe dad hits mom or yells at her or something, I'm going to be in that experience in the womb, and I probably don't want to go out there. I probably will feel the feeling of, I'm just staying in here. This is not safe.
May not feel safe.
And,
That's right.
and so when that person gets born, they might have trouble grounding and centering and being in their body and really being here. They don't really want to be here.
Sure, if it doesn't feel safe, if they believe it's not safe to be here because they kept hearing the shouting and their mom's stress hormones were flooding them while they're in the uterus, then why would they want to be here? It doesn't make sense. They'll stay somewhere else, somewhere more creative, more ethereal, maybe more beautiful and safer in that sense, right? We have a sense that if I'm not really here in my body, I won't be hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
And that shows up in their body physically when they walk in the room. You can see it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's surprising how much our sense of self really has to do with our relationship to how we feel in our bodies. The neurologist Antonio Damasio has written a lot about this, and he has a number of books, but his book on I'm drawing a blank on the title, The Feeling of What Happens, really talks about the different aspects of what a self is that we have before we can have an autobiographical self, a history, and so on. We have to have a sense of self that's continuous within us, that follows from moment to moment, and that really is based on body mapping. That most of his research and a lot of neurological research based on damage to people who have strokes or head injuries and so on. So they piece together, how do we function when these functions are missing? And one of the things he's really developed is the notion that to the extent that we map our bodies inside and know where we are in space, how we connect with our body, that gives us a sense of self and agency. And that when we don't have that, people feel less solid and less secure in themselves.
Could you spell out a little bit more the idea of mapping our bodies? Could you give a little more?
Yeah. Yeah. So our neurological system, we make all these neuromuscular connections that allow us to sense, oh, am I sitting on my behind in the chair and how much pressure is there? Are my feet touching the floor and how much pressure is there? Am I listing to one side or the other? Which gives us our perception of where we are in space, allows us to make the kinds of movements we need to make to get food, find a mate, get away from danger, and so on. And realize these are actions that don't necessarily require a nervous system. Single-celled organisms can do this, right? So we'll talk later about how that can be, because it still exists in us. But for our purposes right now, Damasio and most modern scientific work focuses on the neuromuscular connections, and how body mapping is literal. We have places in our brain that represent different parts of our body. You know, you've probably heard about the vocal center or the visual center, and these different parts of the brain that process different kinds of information. And to the extent that they process it well and are coherent and link up with each other, we have a more continuous, holistic sense of ourself in space, feel more solid, feel more secure, right? Which isn't just a physical sense, but security. It's like self-esteem. It's a sense of, am I okay? Which is such an important part of what it is to have a self. Is my self okay? You mentioned the example of a child who grows up when it doesn't feel safe, right? That's not a very secure, stable way to go through life if you feel that you're not safe, right? That will affect a lot of your choices about what you reach out for, what kinds of relationships you allow, and so on.
Do you, from your perspective, and you can speak from your perspective and also from a core perspective, because it may be different, but do you think there really is a coherent self?
So this is a fascinating thing, right? It's a wonderful area of research we refer to consciousness, the notion that we have a self, that we're aware of it, as the hard problem in science, right? We don't have a clear answer for that.
Right.
My understanding, my experience as a person, and my understanding from the reading I've done and working with other people, and what I would say is I think I can speak clearly from what the core energetic experience or understanding is, having studied a lot with John and met with the other teachers of this work, that the self is an evolving process. It's not a thing, right? And that
it's like a verb.
It's like a verb.
And we're selfing.
We're selfing. That's right. And when people come in to work with us, they're in various stages of selfing, right? They may be very oriented to their physical body and aware of that, but less aware of their emotional self or their mental self. Or somebody's very aware of their mental self, but not very connected to their physical self.
Right.
So at first there's let's link up all these parts of the self, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the will and intention, the drive to focus our attention toward a goal, or the spiritual self, what goes beyond, what's larger than my individual self. And we evolve those parts, balancing reason, mental part, will, our intention, and emotion. And then, of course, if we can incorporate those three in balance, now we can begin to transcend those, and the self evolves to be not just our separate self, just me, but how am I connected to or not separate from? And I would think of that as the evolution of the self.
Exactly. And so I want to just go a little bit deeper into this. So we come into this world as an infant with some genetics and some spiritual stuff, but we're kind of consciousness, just kind of open and experiencing. And then things start to happen, like the experience I described earlier of the child reaching out and not being able to. We start to learn what's okay and what's not okay. We start to learn strategies, and pretty soon we become this kind of strategy. And we have the image of who we think we're supposed to be, the idealized self-image, and we're aiming for this, and we're constantly not able to get it. Something goes wrong. Something happens. We overreact. We get in trouble. We make a mistake. And then we have to find a way to readjust our perception of that experience to maintain a coherent self.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really coherent.
Yeah.
So is there like an authentic self that started out in that infant? From your perspective, is there something? What is the self?
Well, it's a fascinating question, right? And I would even go before birth, right? As you mentioned, things happen in the womb. And we come in with a set of our genetic blueprint from our parents. And the epigenetics that are the modulators that turn those genes off and on, which have to do with, as we know, previous generations in our history, right? We now know that the Irish potato famine turned on certain epigenetic controllers of the genes. So multi-generations later, it's affecting the health outcomes and the attitudes of people who never personally experienced that starvation, but they're influenced by it. So clearly our sense of what the individual self is gets stretched well beyond what we can conceive of as ourself as some isolated individual. That clearly doesn't exist, right? And yet we have this awareness, our perception of ourself, which we know is limited, right? My five senses, sight and hearing and so on, are only picking up a small amount of the information that's possible. But they do pick up some, and I'm attempting to make a coherent narrative and experience of all that information that I'm calling myself. Right? So I have some sliver of experience that I refer to as myself, which clearly has a much broader perspective that's, as we talked about, in the unconscious. When I start to expand my awareness to what all is in my unconscious, and where those boundaries between my personal sense of self and the larger historical sense of self, evolution of the self go, I still think there is a self. When you put a drop of water in the ocean, you don't see that drop so much, but it's still a drop of water. It still exists as a drop or a molecule. Right. Or an atom or really energetic vibrations, because our notion of some solid separate thing is that's our perception, but we know that this is all energy vibrating, and we just happen to be a coherent mass of vibration in one place, seemingly at one time. But the consciousness still seems to exist. I imagine you have had, and I know I've had the experience of becoming one, losing my separate identity, and yet I was still aware. I was still there. I was conscious of it. So it's an interesting non-duality. It's not either or. Either I'm separate or I'm just part of something larger and losing myself. It seems that both exist.
The idea of an evolution of self, to me, is really important.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what the self is, but I know that when I become self-aware, when I become aware of my unconscious self, when I start to do work around like the body-centered issues that I have and start to release those, that there's a freedom, there's a liberation that happens, and there's a more authentic experience of me that's not driven by all of these strategies I learned as a 5-year-old to survive.
Yeah.
And the deeper I go into that, there is something there that I can get in touch with that perhaps even is more centered, or the beginning of something that started even before we dealt with the potato famine, genetics, and so on and so forth inside of us.
Yeah.
So there's something about this evolution that's very rewarding and amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm still not sure there is a real, I don't know what the self is a better way to say it.
Well, to come back to your example of the child and the development, or to the history of psychosomatic medicine, what's really fascinating and interesting and helpful about psychosomatic therapy or the core energetic model is that people come in because they're not experiencing fulfillment, satisfaction, they're having frustration, they're having limitations, they're having anxiety, whatever symptoms they're having.
Or behaviors they don't understand. Why do I do this?
Why do I keep doing this thing, even though I know it's not so good for me?
Right.
Addictions or relationship patterns. And that the evolution of the self is very much the process of addressing those patterns. Partly just the ones we learn as a child. Sure, I keep reaching out and getting the message, it's not okay, or I interpret the message, right? My mother thinks she's protecting me from putting my hand on the stove, but I hear it as it's not okay to reach for what I want, right? And my child consciousness starts to interpret that message and hears that and makes its adaptations. Oh, I'll stop reaching out. Oh, I'll hold back. Or maybe, someday I'll get back at her and I'll be mad at her, whatever my adaptation is. And that becomes our identity. That's the self that we have. Oh, I'm a guy who's always going to fight back, or I'm a guy who's never going to reach out. And it's not even conscious. So in this sense, to evolve the self is to become conscious of that.
Yeah.
To be able to practice, have a range of experiences. Oh, I know how to reach out, and I can reach out in this situation. Oh, this situation isn't going to get me what I want anyway, so I won't choose to reach out here.
Right.
To have all those options and possibilities gives much more satisfaction in life. The kinds of relationships and jobs and satisfaction that people have grows and evolves, right? And that's just on a simple personal level, right? At a certain point, as we work through our own distortions, our beliefs, it's not okay to reach out, or it's not safe here, and our physical distortions, oh, I'm only going to be a collapsed person and not have my full ability to reach out, which is a positive aggression. I want that thing, and it's okay to reach as long as I'm not stepping on somebody else necessarily to get it, right? Sure. And in that sense, it's a positive thing to reach for that apple and take a bite. We're working through our own personal distortions in consciousness, right? And we're becoming more evolved, more coherent, have more capacity, right? And then the other part of evolution of the self is to then offer and give all the gifts that we have, because we each come in with a set of gifts, right? We're not really a blank slate. Some children come in as artistic. Some come in as, very rational. Some come in as very loving. That's part of their nature. You can see it from day one. You have, a child. It's remarkable how they're already people, right? They're open and they're not fully formed, but there's so much about their personality that comes with them.
Yes.
So where that comes from, how that works, that's a whole nother part of this story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so this process we're describing, we have a good understanding now of sort of why somatic therapy exists, that we understand this is not just a mental thing. You can't get through this stuff by just talking about it. It can help for sure, having self-awareness, seeing it, understanding it, but sometimes there's stuff in our body that is the unconscious that we have to address in a different way. And what body-centered therapy or somatic therapy does is it begins to use the body to release because the memories are held there. They're held in how we hold things and how we experience things, or how we give up, or how we try to get out of here and leave. And so that can be addressed through working with the body and the energy in the body.
Yep. Yeah, there's now we have 100 years of practice and development of how best to help people who have formed unconscious patterns that are physical as well as emotional and psychological, to make those connections, to practice learning new possibilities, and to seeing and understand how muscle memory works. Right? The notion that things are stored in the body is seemingly vague, but if we understand, muscles have memory. Muscles learn how to contract in certain ways and have patterns of contraction, certain tension patterns, that when somebody comes into the office and says, gee, doc, I'm I'm really anxious, and by the way, I have neck pain and my shoulders hurt all the time, and you can mention, oh, did you notice your shoulders are up in your ears? They may not have made those connections that feeling anxious can drive our shoulders up into our ears and cause muscle tension and pains and so on. It gives us a way to work with all the levels of somebody, which goes so much deeper than any one level by itself.
Yeah. So I think this is a really good place to stop here for this. We've sort of walked through the beginning process of looking at self from the somatic perspective and understanding what the self is and what evolving the self might be. And today we're going to start wading our way into the unconscious self, which is one of my favorite subjects.
Great topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so much of this process is really about making the unconscious conscious. And if we think about what our experiences are coming into this life, so much of what happens to us those before we're born, those first years, is not part of our conscious memory. Most people have very few, if any, memories of those first years, right? So that whole process remains unconscious. It all happened. We were living for years as physical and emotional beings before we developed much of a sense of memory or identity or, rational ego.
Conceptualization.
Any of those things didn't exist till we're 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have all these years of history. And if we, thinking back to Reich's description of character, this notion that we are born and we have needs, and some of our needs don't get met. It's just a given here in this plane of existence. Not that our parents, there's nothing wrong with them, but they're imperfect human beings and they can't always be there for us in all the ways that we needed them to be, as much as they try. So when we have unmet needs, we will experience, as you were describing, something painful, something scary, something sad, some loss. Oh, I reach up for mommy and I want the contact and my hand gets slapped because there's a hot stove there and I don't know this. And so my need for contact and to be affirmed and so on doesn't get met. And when that need doesn't get met, we form these patterns, these adaptations, what we might call defenses, ways of not feeling it so much because it's very threatening to our sense of being, right? If it's not okay for me to reach out for mommy, who I need so much, I'm so dependent on, and who is godlike in my eyes, it's going to be painful, sad, scary, and so on. We have to find a way to manage that. And as we move from our open, loving, connective, creative self, right, which we might call the higher self or the unitive self or just the larger self, we form these other defensive aspects, which in core energetics, it's a really useful, perhaps oversimplification, but a way to think about the defenses become the lower self, the aspect of us that says, I won't feel that, right? I'll run away, I'll pull myself in, I'll close off, or I'll fight, right? I'll make you give it to me, right? Self-will, pride, and fear. But of course, those self-will, I'll make you give it to me, or fear, usually doesn't go over all that well with our parents or in the outer world.
Funny how that is.
Yeah. So then we put a mask over that. We learn, oh, they don't want me to be outwardly aggressive or angry and so on. So I have to find another defense that covers up this vulnerable, loving, connective part and the aggressive, fearful, prideful part. The mask self, what Jung called the persona, or many other different theorists have different names for it, the false self and so on, is pretty universal. Most therapies, most growth processes recognize that we all have a persona, a false self, right? So the first step, and what's so important to bring to consciousness, is just that. Oh, I have an image, an idea, a sense of self that I'm trying to be, right? We've all
unconsciously.
unconsciously,
Right.
right? I'm going to be the good boy or the good girl or the strong boy
Or the rebel.
or the rebel, right? We have an image of ourselves, how we think we're supposed to be, and we develop this mostly unconsciously. And of course, it affects everything that we do. To the extent that we're unconscious of it, and to the extent that that becomes our whole identity, if we're the good boy, you can't ever be angry. You can't ever be sad or scared. You always have to be in that good boy role. How limiting is that? It takes so much energy and so much distortion of real feelings and real longings and so on. It's not real. So, of course, the crucial part in most health issues is the mask self, the false self, is the cause of most of our mental health disturbances. The vast majority of all of our problems are because we're living in a false way. We're not living true to ourselves. We can't even say, oh, I hurt here, or oh, I'm sad there, because it doesn't fit our image. Now we're in distortion.
Right.
And you, of course, have been in the experience of being with somebody when you know what they're saying doesn't match the feeling that you're having with them.
Right.
The sickly sweet story or the overly dramatic story, or, you have a feeling like somebody's trying to control you, but they're not saying those words, but you know something else is happening.
Right.
We've all had that experience, right? And we all tend to do that, and we tend to do it in one of three ways. We think of fight or flight are the obvious ones, right? If we can win in a fight, we'll tend to fight. So be aggressive, have power over somebody. Or if we can't win, we'll run away, flee, right? Serenity.
Right.
I'm not connected to you. I'll stay separate. I don't need anything from you. And of course, in between that is submit. If we can't win the fight, it's better to give up and stay connected for many people than to withdraw.
Right.
So we have these three broad strokes of kinds of masks. Love, which is the submission mask. I'll always be loving. I'll always be good. Whatever you say, whatever you do, I'll give in. It's okay, right? Power. No, I'm going to win. I'm going to control things. Or serenity. I'll stay back and be removed.
And that's, I think, so, and they all have various flavors, right? Sometimes the love mask is a little more, there's not complete submission. It's actually a way of, I'm just going to give you, I'm going to give you everything, and then you're going to like me. And it's not actually submission, but it is some version of that.
I'll give in, knowing that ultimately then you'll
like
me back.
You'll give me back. So so there's both love and power are interesting because they're going after something, right? I'm going to give, trying to get, there's this thing. And then power is, it's energetic. I'm going to come over the top here. I'm going to be in control. Instead of coming in this way to try to get something, I'm going to come on over here and I'm going to be in control. And it can be as much as, I know what I'm doing here, listen to me, or screw you, don't even get in my way. It can be all the different versions, right? But I'm in control. And then there's serenity, which, I really think this is a really unique mask. And I've used a little bit of all three of those. Power mask was, as a child, a big one for me. Mm-hmm. As an adult, the one I had to work on was more the serenity mask, where it's, instead of going after something, you withdraw. You literally pull back and you set a little boundary here that says, you're not getting any closer than this. And the words that go with that boundary are, I'm good, I'm fine. I don't need anything. I'm okay. No, everything's fine here. And this person will never get their needs met because they're admitting they don't have any. I don't need anything. It's a really, but it's so different than the other two, which are going after something.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is where your viewers can also relate to this personally. We all have a persona. Oh, I'm the all-loving one. I'll always be loving no matter what people say. Or I'm the strong one. I'm always going to be in control. I'll control my feelings. I can be in control. Or I'm the aloof one. I can stay back.
Right.
And to be able to bring that to consciousness, start thinking about, oh, which one of those do I use? And maybe it's different at work, or in your primary relationship. You might tend to have, there's lots of stories of the CEO who's in charge and control at work, and then he comes home and wants to be dominated. He wants to be submissive. He wants to try on the other persona because he's so overdone with the power mask.
Yeah, he wants to let go completely.
He wants to let go, right? So you get to look at how you use these different strategies, perhaps in different places or with different people, with the notion that, oh, wait, if I'm using a strategy, one, it's not really real. It's not all of who I am. In fact, it's kind of a reflection, like your strategy of the withdrawal and the Serenity mask also shows that you have that ability to be a spiritually separate and have that perspective person underneath.
Right.
There are certain qualities that we bring with us that are reflected in the mask. It's just the mask is not the real deal, it's the reflection of it.
Right. It's a distorted version of the truth.
A distorted version of the truth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is a great way of thinking about this whole model, that the real self, the higher self, the unitive self, the loving, connective, compassionate, vulnerable self is the real self. Anything else is just a distortion of that. It's not really a separate thing, but it's a distortion. It's like putting on a lens and seeing a color and
or blurry
or blurry, or the mask becomes blurry because it's a distortion of reality. And the undoing of that, the becoming conscious of it, the choosing to let that go, usually involves, oh, I'm aware I have that mask. What's it costing me?
Right.
How much energy it takes to maintain that, noticing the pattern that, oh, I'm trying to be the good guy all the time. And what happens when I fall short, right? Because I'll fall short of being the good guy. My girlfriend and wife will think I fell short. My work will see me falling short. I'll feel terrible. I'll push myself to get back up there. I'll fall short. I'll feel terrible, and around it goes. It's endless, right? Until we realize, oh, I'm caught in this endless cycle that's not satisfying.
Right.
Then we can decide to undo it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ken, you said something that reminded me of like one of the examples of how I was able to talk about the mask that people could relate to, because some people don't understand. What do you mean I have a mask? This is just me. It's unconscious, so how do they know?
Right.
But you just gave a great example that I like, where you are a different person at work. You are a different person at home. Some of us are nicer to the people at work than we are to the person we're supposed to be at home and love. We don't know how to manage all of this, and we're not the same person.
Yeah.
And so that is an example of how we can see the mask in everyday life, because we're rarely the same person everywhere we go.
Sure.
And I also wanted to add one more thing to this, and that is that, I think this was in The Undefended Self, that the statement of the mask is, there's two parts to that. One is, this is who I think you want me to be, right? And so that's what we present. This is who I think you want me to be. I'm going to present this. And then there's a mask of, this is how I want you to see me, which is a little more rebellious, perhaps.
A little more direct. More of a clear sense of, I want something from you. I want you to see me a certain way.
Right, exactly. Instead of submitting and, okay, this is who I think you want me to be. But those are other ways, other flavors of understanding the mask when you look at yourself.
I find that a very useful question to ask. I ask it of almost anyone who comes to see me. How do you want to be seen in the world? Because people aren't always conscious of that. They don't think about it, but we all want to be seen certain ways, maybe differently at work, competent, strong, by your partner, loving, caring, whatever it is. But to the extent we want to be seen a certain way, now we're putting on a front. It's not just about how they actually see us in all of our glory and foibles. Yeah.
So then we get a chance to begin to become self-aware of the mask. And the mask is a little less unconscious than perhaps than the lower self, which we'll get into later. So it's something that you begin to, it's a quicker way to get a grasp of unconsciousness, right?
Yep.
And so once we bring that up, then what happens then, right?
So what happens then is that the mask is made up of certain elements, right? There is this idealized self-image. There's the way that I want to be seen in the world, right? Which we all have, and that so it's universal. It's a great entree point, right? But there are other aspects of the mask that we all share. Confusion. When we're confused, we're in our mask. When we're justifying or rationalizing, well, this happened because this, that, and the other thing happened, and he's only mad at me because all these shortcomings of it. Criticism. Oh, he's no good at this. She's no good at that. Judgment, right? Yeah. It's not that vanilla ice cream is not my favorite. It's just bad.
Right.
And blame, right? It's your fault that all these things are happening. Those elements, rationalization, justification, confusion, judgment, criticism, and blame, are aspects of the mask. They're all a version of a defense that's in distortion. They're not real in and of themselves. My judgments of something are just my opinion. They're, they may have a piece of truth to them,
right?
Just like my idealized self has a piece of truth to it. I might be at times serene and peaceful and not need things from you. But that's different than I'm always peaceful and serene and never need anything.
Right. And it's interesting too. So one of my, I don't want to say religion. One of my paths was the Toltec tradition. And in that, you're hunting and stalking your other, the unconscious self. And this is what I loved about core energetics, because the mask, you give this thing like, oh, so if you're hunting for it, if you find yourself judging, blaming, criticizing, confused, if you find yourself doing these things, you are probably not only in your mask, but your unconscious, your lower self, your deeper unconscious is probably right there in the room next to you. And that's an opportunity to begin looking for it.
That's right. Right. Yeah, since the mask is the most outer layer of defense and the least coherent and least real, it's the least productive, right? It's like a bad cell signal. And that's not just a metaphor, right? When our mind and body make connections, the more coherent that signal is. If you want your muscle to fire and give you a strong reflex, right, it should be a coherent, strong signal, right? To the extent that signal is not a clear, strong one, your arm won't pull as strongly, right? It's no different with the coherent version of information in the mask. It's not coherent. It's not a strong signal. It's like a bad cell signal. And it's connecting, your sense of yourself with your friends, with your partners, with your work. It sends unclear signals that are not conscious to you, but are affecting everything you do.
I love that analogy. I hadn't thought about it that way. The weak signal, that's great.
Yeah. Well, I think of us, the one of the great things about the core energetics model, and this thing that we're talking about, the higher self, lower self mask, is that it's a model of energy and consciousness. That the higher self has a certain frequency and vibration. It's an energetic experience. You know it when you feel it. It's loving, it's open, it's connected, it's expansive, right? Lower self is also a clear, concise picture, but it's not so open and loving, right? The mask is various forms of incoherent, not clear signaling, problematic because it's in distortion.
Right.
So we can think of it energetically as well as aspects of consciousness. Energy and consciousness gives us a sense of what evolution is. We're moving toward that higher coherent energy form that we actually are.
And this comes to sort of like when you come down to having somebody in the room who's working with their mask. I know for me, knowing that the higher self and the mask and the lower self feel differently in the body. One and that the experience is somewhat unconscious. one of the first things that I do when I'm working with somebody is have them get up and embody that experience, because then you're bringing the unconscious consciously. So you start to have the experience and be in your mask and say, well, I'm in control. Screw you. You can't, or, I'm fine. I don't, walk around the room doing that and talking about it. You bring it into consciousness. And then you start to notice when you leave the office, when the person you're working with goes home, they start to realize, oh, I'm doing that again. It becomes conscious.
Becomes conscious, right. I'm glad that you bring that in, right? That's the words that we use may not say higher self, lower self, or mask, but there's a different energetic feel, a different sensation in our body. And until we learn to embody it and walk around the room feeling what's it like to be in that distorted feeling, we're not conscious of it. Right. Once we're conscious of it, we'll notice it more, then we might be able to choose to change it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So those are the initial sessions, right? Is, learning how to understand and feel and experience when you're in your mask, when you're in that false self, which we all do. We spend way too much time there and too much energy there. It's unfortunate.
Right.
But, all you have to do is turn on the TV and see how much people are obviously not being their real self. They're saying one thing and then doing something else, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is sort of the magic, is that making it conscious. Mm-hmm. And it is a physical experience. Yes. The unconscious self is held in the body because it's there because we couldn't hold it in our memory here. And so it's a big part of this process.
I love what you just did. It's such a normal way of thinking about, you just said, we hold it in our body because we couldn't hold it here, as if these were two separate mechanisms, mm-hmm. right? And sure, the biggest collection of neurons and glial cells is up here, but they are distributed all down through our torso. And we have this tendency to think of, this is where the action is. This is where thinking and consciousness is. But it doesn't actually work that way, right? The signals are going both directions. Our body is taking in information and sending it up. And for instance, your heart rate. If your heart rate goes up, it will send that signal up the vagus nerve, and your brain will say, heart rate's going up. Well, should I be nervous? Should I start running? What's going on? And it will send messages down. Mm-hmm. Your breathing rate, your muscle tension, right? It's a two-way communication.
Yes.
And that every cell is a receptor. Every cell has the ability to take in information from the outside and send it on through its network of connections. Right. And every cell is capable of receiving information from all the other cells around it. So we tend to have this separation of mind and body, which doesn't really exist. They're specialized areas, sure, but they're not separate.
Ultimately, there isn't a separation between me and you.
No.
I mean, right. When you really get down to it, right?
Yeah, energetically, we are just vibrating coherencies in the larger field. I would like to say there's a couple other elements of the mask that I find really useful to understand and talk about. That along with this notion of an idealized self-image, an idea about who we're supposed to be, we have many other images. You mentioned one before. When the child reaches up and wants contact with the mother and she sends a signal it's not okay, the child begins to form the image, it's not okay to reach for what I want, right? That becomes an emotionally charged belief about the world, mm-hmm. right? It's completely unconscious. The child's not thinking that, but kid logic is a very powerful thing. Kids are constantly making experiments. The kid's knocking the milk off and seeing what happens, and then they knock the milk off again and seeing what happens. And they're seeing that their mother comes and picks it up and eventually is getting disgruntled at this process. Kids are constantly trying to sort out what's going on in the world,
right,
and making all sorts of wrong or partly wrong conclusions based on their limited experience. It was their experience. Hey, if my mom's mad at me all the time, I would think women or people in authority are angry, right? It's a reasonable
Or I must not be a good
or
person.
I'm not a good person.
I'm something wrong with me.
Something wrong with me. Another alternate version of that story.
Yeah.
Instead of the broader thing as, oh, my mom was mad and I got the brunt of it, right? So being able to explore and know that we all have images, partially true beliefs that are emotionally charged, that are held in our body because they formed long before we had much of a cognitive process, is so important, right? The whole notion of cognitive behavioral therapy is based on that, right? It's been shown to be clearly an effective form of therapy to help people understand, yes, you have beliefs. Yes, it affects your behavior. This is a basis for, simple, basic therapy. That is part of our work too. We have to help people understand that. We think of those distortions in beliefs, those partially true beliefs, as part of the mask. They're perhaps the lowest level of the mask. Once somebody can say, oh, I understand that this is my false belief. Now we're moving out of distortion. We're not identified with it. We're identifying it.
Right. That's a great separation between the two.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We're now conscious of it. We can see it. We don't have to feel bad about it. We don't have to have a charge about it. We can just say, oh, yeah, that's happening. Now we have some options now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I want to just say, we'll say more about this when we're talking about lower self too, but one of the reasons things go into the unconscious is because we feel bad about it. And so when we get to see it, it's really important that we learn how not to feel bad about it because it just pushes it back again.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah.
So I want to just sort of sum this up. We don't remember everything that happened to us as a child cognitively, but we do have memories. They're not always real, true memories that we come up with conclusions in how we respond to something that isn't a conclusion we make here necessarily.
Right.
It's a conclusion that happens. So even though we don't remember something, we do remember it. We have a memory. We have a way of holding it in our body. And that is a big aspect of our unconscious self. That's kind of where it's held.
Yeah.
And that unconscious self then has to find a way we have to find a way to move in the world. And those parts of us are informing that. And we form a mask, we form a way of being in the world, we present it to the world, and we find ways to navigate it. So is that a good nutshell?
It's a great nutshell. And I'm glad you framed it that way. And I want to come back to that. It's another aspect of what memory is, how it works, thinking about mind-body connections, what consciousness is that we can talk about.
I'm looking forward. I love that conversation. So great. Well, then we'll stop here for now and we'll come back and do part 3.
All right.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate your hanging out with us. And if you have any comments or thoughts or something you would like to hear here, please leave a comment below and be good to you. The Crack Between the Worlds is conceived and hosted by Mark Wald, produced, engineered, and edited by Lloyd Lemmerman. Music composed by Kindly, a Turning on the Lights production. For updates, visit Crack Between the Worlds and our Instagram @The Crack Between the Worlds.